Capitol. Every state's a little bit different, but in Connecticut, the lobbyists and advocates have to stand behind this velvet rope. It's been an experience, so I hope that I leave you with some wisdom, some next steps, and just some general, what I wish I knew tips. So, Josh got a little bit, most of it, pretty much all of it, into who I am, my background at least. My technical title is Public Policy and Advocacy Associate. I'm with the Connecticut Community Nonprofit Alliance. I am a registered lobbyist, and I think lobbyist is a term that raises some hackles in some of the grassroots spheres. So I want to also explain what that technically means. In advocacy and lobbying, we talk about white hat and black hat lobbyists. Your black hat lobbyists are your corporate contract lobbyists, your EverSource lobbyists, your et cetera, et cetera. There are lobbying firms in the state, some of whom we actually contract with, whose job it is to represent various clients and give them a voice at the Capitol. I'm an in-house lobbyist advocate, so I work not for a lobbying firm, I work for the Connecticut Nonprofit Alliance. And so it's the reason I am a registered lobbyist is that in the state of Connecticut, if you spend 3,000 working hours or more a year lobbying for legislation, you have to register with the state ethics office, yada yada. I'm gonna take off my jacket because it's kind of warm. So, as Josh mentioned, I went to UConn, I'm a social worker. I'm also a locally elected official. I'm a Democrat in Waterford, and I used to work for the Connecticut House Democrats. So going from staffer role to lobbyist has been a transition for me, the places I am and am not allowed to go. But I'll jump into it. Advocacy, why does it matter? Right, these are some examples. Weekends and the 40-hour work week, Social Security, public education, voting rights, the ADA. These are all examples of things that I think we generally take for granted as just part of our experience. I know that even in the last few years, like marriage equality has just become like, I don't know, yeah. I certainly remember a time when people were talking about same-sex marriage, but it's sort of just become this like, yep, that's just how it works now. But these are policies that were once ideas. They were decisions. They were a series of decisions. And they didn't become reality and policy overnight. These movements were built on relationships, timing, persistence, among many other things. I also want to, here I say, advocacy works. I want to say, big caveat, right? I don't want to stand here and tell you that the system is not flawed, the political system, because it is. It is flawed. I think the thesis of my presentation today is understanding how to work within the flawed system is how we make the system better. It's unfortunately a reality. I wish I could stop my feet and restructure a lot of how our government works. I certainly had some frustrations this past year. Got a little grossed out by how the sausage gets made. But the truth is that advocacy does work. And it doesn't require being an insider, but it does require an understanding of the system that you're trying to change. So my 3 big takeaways for today: systems were built by people and they can be changed by people. Relationships are the currency of political power, and consistency and timing beat perfection every time. I am a notorious perfectionist, so that third one's a little bit for me. But really the name of the game is consistency, practice, and just showing up. So my first point, this is sort of what I was getting at before, the myth of the unmovable system, right? When we feel like nothing will change, it's because we've mistaken the current for permanent. What are some things you've heard, right? Like, politicians don't listen to regular people. What are some myths, or maybe not myths, but just like held beliefs that we hold? This doesn't have to be interactive if you don't want to. That's okay.
The Massachusetts legislature will never pass ranked choice voting.
Yeah. And did they?
Not yet.
Not yet. Yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, great. Advocacy works.
My vote doesn't matter.
What was it? Oh, my vote doesn't matter. Yeah, I hear that one a lot. And that could be a whole other presentation. The system is rigged, right? Like, we hear these sort of messages. I think a lot of the time politics and government feels really inaccessible to people. And this is some maybe optimistic language, but you know, I do think that I have personally seen, I'll say, change in both our national, positive change in our national government, in our state government, in my local government, and again, until we can, without overthrowing anybody, which I don't officially endorse, we have to work within the system. The systems are decisions and not facts, right? So every policy, law, etc., started with a proposal, and there are people who fought for it, people who fought against it. Minimum wage, paid family leave, marriage equality, they all seemed politically impossible until they weren't. So this doesn't just happen in a vacuum, this doesn't happen overnight, it happens because people organized. They built power and they worked the process. So I'm to get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty, and I also want to say that I'm speaking from my experience working in the state legislature. This is very state-focused. I will also say my experience is in Connecticut. I know that we've got folks from all over the Northeast here. I tried to not make it too Connecticut specific, but I will speak a little bit to the Connecticut legislature. But the general simplified map of how these decisions are made is that an issue is identified, a bill is drafted, there's a committee hearing, a floor vote, it will go to the second chamber for another floor vote, it's signed into law, and then it's implemented. If you heard the How a Bill Becomes a Law song, you're probably familiar with this general structure. But decisions also happen outside of the legislature. There are state agencies that make rules. Budgets are allocated differently. There are executive orders, local zoning boards. So it's not all just part of this legislative process. And there are a lot of entry points, right? It could be showing up to a community event, right? Talking to your local official, showing up to a town meeting, and just being there to witness what is happening. I will say it's easy to make shitty decisions when nobody's paying attention, when nobody else is in the room. It's easy to get away with too. Oh, I didn't have enough photos, and I figured instead of stock photos, I would just fill the extra photos in my presentation with pictures of my cats. So enjoy. I'll try not to let that derail me too much, but these are my cats, some of my cats. What this really means for you, you don't have to know everything, but you do need to know your issue, and you need to know who your decision makers are. You know, Dr. Westfall, thank you, Jesus, was talking about like those policy levers, right? You have to know who is making those decisions based on what policies you're trying to influence. It's not necessarily about shouting loudly, although that does come into play, but it's about showing up strategically and consistently. And the most strategic thing you can do is invest in relationships, which takes me to my second point. Why do relationships drive change? So a petition with 10,000 signatures, easy enough to ignore. There are a lot of petitions. But a constituent who's met with a legislator's office 3 times, knows the staff, and represents a coalition of several organizations is not easy to ignore. Decision makers are really managing risk. They're moving toward people and groups that they trust and away from uncertainty. So your goal as an advocate is to become a trusted, reliable, known voice on your issue. I'll use my work as an example. The Connecticut Nonprofit Alliance has officially merged and is celebrating their 10-year anniversary this year. My boss and my grand boss, as Josh would call it, they have been in our building advocating for nonprofits year after year after year after year. When there is a question that comes up, how is this going to affect nonprofits? Or, how would this affect your providers? What are issues that we're hearing? They know that they can go to my boss and ask him as a subject matter expert. So being an advocate isn't just about advocating for things, it's also about being, that trusted voice. Legislators will ask him for talking points about bills that they're supporting. It's also important to remember that legislators are not necessarily experts, and they rely heavily on people who are. So they also rely heavily on staff legislators, and knowing a legislative aide can be almost or just as valuable as knowing the member. Being a constituent, right? Being somebody who they know is or is not voting for them carries more weight than necessarily a national campaign. And trusted intermediaries, advocates who have a track record, are consulted before votes, not just lobbied after the fact, like I was the example of my boss. So look up who represents you at every level. Start local. If you don't know who your governor is, I know that this is a savvy group, but really know who the people are who represent you, and get to know who, not just who they are, but more about them. And they are your targets. So building relationships also means building coalition. This is actually a picture. I'm going to talk a little bit about a bill I worked on this past session that unfortunately didn't pass, but it was about social work licensure. And we as the Nonprofit Alliance represent nonprofits, broad. But this social work licensure issue was really a workforce issue for us. Social workers who have to take this exam have a more difficult time entering the workforce. So from us, we were speaking on the issue from a workforce perspective. We partnered with the National Association for Social Workers who represent social workers, right? We can't necessarily, what did you say, know your scope, right? Like, we can't necessarily speak for social workers, that's not our role as the Nonprofit Alliance, but we can work with people who do. And having a breadth of support signals to decision makers that a position has a wide backing, and it reduces their political risk. So how do you find your coalition partners, right? Who else is affected by this issue, even if they're coming from a totally different place? So the example of a housing bill, it might unite tenant advocates, faith communities, and business groups concerned about workforce. And it's also important to think about your unexpected allies. If a legislator won't meet with an advocacy group, they might meet with a business owner, or a pediatrician, or somebody else besides necessarily the advocate. So, coming alone as a meeting, coming with 10 organizations as a movement.
Is that cool?
It's not.
It's you? I like it.
Thank you. Coming along with partnership, when we're talking about partnership and sustained relationships here, I mean with legislators, right? So, knowing your legislators is important in terms of who they are, but also starting to build relationships with them is really important. Don't only show up when you need something, right? Send them a thank you card. Send them relevant articles. Congratulate them on their wins. Attend their public events and volunteer for their campaigns. If that's your jam. Not all of us want to super support our elected officials in that way, which is totally fine. But just be a resource to them, right? Offer to provide data, connect them with constituents who have lived experience, and help staff understand the technical aspects of the issue. As somebody who worked as a staffer at House Dems, I can say that the staff hold a lot more power than we think. Long-term credibility compounds, and each interaction builds on the last. And I will also say, think twice before burning bridges. For example, there's a state senator in Connecticut that I could not disagree more. I'm not gonna name names. He makes me so angry all the time. And that said, for this issue of social work licensure, he is somebody who holds weight in the state senate. And as much as I would love to go online and be like, Senator blah blah blah, blah blah blah, etc., it is in the best interest of my issue going forward to not burn that bridge, to maybe have a professional and cordial relationship. Obviously, I'm not going to be volunteering on his campaign anytime soon, but you know, it's important to be careful about who you piss off. You can't make everybody happy, but just be strategic and mindful of who you piss off. If you're unsure where to start, oh, that's me with a baby goat. They have all these events at the Capitol all the time, and they had baby goats for some town day, and it was so cute. Request a meeting with your legislator's office, right? Staff meetings also count and are often easier to get. Introduce yourself before you have an ask, right? I work on this issue, I'm in your district, I introduce myself. It could even be showing up to their coffee hour. A lot of our legislators have like coffee and conversation, and like 3 people show up. Like, be one of those 3 people. Find one coalition partner this month, someone working on a related issue. Rank the vote. What a great coalition partner sitting in the room with us. And join or attend a hearing or a meeting just to observe. Get the sense of what's going on. Take a tour at your state capitol. Go into a hearing room, see what it feels like. And it demystifies the process. You'll also start to recognize people's faces. Consistency and timing beat perfection. I took out a whole slide about perfectionism being the enemy of good. I don't need a whole slide to talk about that, but consistency and timing are really the key here. Know the rules. Every state legislature operates its own calendar, rules, culture. Like I said, Connecticut, we've got ropes. Some states it's free-for-all. We have a part-time legislature in Connecticut. Some states have a full-time legislature. It looks a little different for everybody, but it's important to understand your state's rules. Working within that rhythm increases your effectiveness. And not knowing the timeline, it's like showing up to a sporting event in the third quarter and wondering why no one will change the score. The good news is this information is public. It's really easy to learn, and this is actually my homework assignment for you guys, is to find, it might be on your state legislature's website, but it could also be like a third party of how to navigate the Connecticut legislature. Look it up. Know your session calendar and your committee deadlines, because that will affect your advocacy. For an example, Connecticut has a part-time legislature. So it means January to June in odd years for a long session, and February to May in even years. So this year was a short session, and our budget is passed on a biennium basis during the long session, and then is adjusted in the short session. There are other rules that go along with this. Like, for example, in a long session, any legislator can introduce a bill. In a short session, only committee chairs or committees can introduce bills. So, not to get into all the nitty-gritties of Connecticut's legislature, but it's important to know these things. Some key deadlines, right? In Connecticut, a bill is introduced in either January or February. Committee deadlines are generally around March and April. There's this period in April where there's sort of like assessing and planning and screening bills, and then they get into the voting sessions, which are typically like the last 3 weeks of the legislative session. So, again, if bill's introduced, public hearing, committee vote, floor debate, other chamber, governor's desk. A little insight, a bill that misses the committee deadline is essentially dead for the year. And so timing your advocacy to committee hearings is often one of your highest leverage moments, especially if you're not a lobbyist who's in the building, or you can't take time off work to go hand out flyers, right? Taking time to testify in a public hearing, or even submit testimony, is a really accessible place to start. But you gotta know what those deadlines are. And you gotta find your window. So this is actually a picture of me testifying in a hearing room. You know, right now we are in Connecticut in the pre-session, right? So we're building relationships, we're educating the staff, we're requesting meetings with legislators, getting bill language drafted. This is also when elections happen and voting, right? So like if you want your guy to be the one making decisions, this is also when you're organizing around that. Early session generally is when bills are introduced, you request more meetings, and you identify committee members on your issues. So my bill went through the Public Health Committee. We met in the early session with the chairs of the Public Health Committee to talk about our bill and talk about strategies. Once you're in the committee phase, this is when you start testifying, you mobilize constituents. So not just me going up by myself to testify, but like I'm calling all my buddies and we're showing up in mass. And this is often where bills live or die. Again, there's like that slow period, and then we sort of get into the late session where there's floor votes, and it's really about the leadership decisions at that point. So the relationships that you've been building the rest of the year pay off now. If you have positioned yourself as an expert on something like ranked choice voting, this is the time when they're gonna say, okay, they have filed this amendment, blah, 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 tell me what this means, right? Or can we compromise in this way? This is when those relationships are really, when they really pay off. And then, you know, in the interim, we hold our legislators accountable. We send our thank yous, we plan for next session, and we build our coalition. That's where I'm right now. My bill died, but I'm working with the chair of the House chair of the Public Health Committee to strategize next year. And I'm working with our members to collect data in real time that we can present about, you know, the workforce impact. Showing up is really important, right? Showing up consistently in your advocacy. One intense push rarely ever works. And we talk about in the legislature, usually it takes about 3 years to know whether or not your bill is gonna see any movement. Not to say that if you haven't seen any movement after 3 years, give up, because that's not what I'm saying at all. But it doesn't normally happen the first time. You don't just introduce a bill and it gets passed that. It happens occasionally, but oftentimes legislation takes years of advocacy and pushing. Every time you show up, have that meeting with your legislator, every relationship, it builds. So set a calendar reminder to email your legislator's office. Attend at least one public event or hearing per session, and send a brief update on your issue once a quarter. Like, hey, new data, just thought you might be interested. Send it off. You know, you don't have to do everything, but you have to do something consistently, and that's how advocacy builds. So, to put it all together, systems change when people understand that they can change them. Change is accelerated by relationships built on trust and coalition, and it happens when advocates know the rules and show up imperfectly, repeatedly, and strategically. It's not abstract, and you can start now. So, this is my call to action. Your next steps. Look up your state's legislature's session calendar and identify the next key deadline for your issue. So for me, it's probably not till January, but there's a lot of prep I can do in the meantime. request a meeting with your state legislator or their staff, just to introduce yourself, or, you know, if that's a little daunting, show up to their community coffee hour, etc. And identify one potential coalition partner to reach out to. I think small movements like this are built on partnerships with other organizations. I will leave you with that. If there are any questions that I will
You first.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a switch.
There we go. Okay. This might be a little adjacent to your work, but how much experience would you recommend someone to have before they either start leading or otherwise completely lead a lobby day event?
I think to go back to my imperfectly, and maybe I shouldn't have taken out my perfectionism slide, now. Just start now. If you think you can organize people to come, organize people to come. You'll make mistakes and you'll learn things the first time you do it, but no, I don't think you need to have any special skills or knowledge to host a lobby day. It might be a helpful opportunity to find a partner. Again, like somebody who can show you around the building, or introduce you to people. You know, one of the roles that I play is when nonprofit members will come and advocate with us at the state legislature is just like pointing out who the legislators are, or you know, pulling them as they're walking by and saying, oh, you know, or you know, can you go ask so and so to come out? I have a constituent who wants to meet them. So it could be helpful to have somebody on the inside, but no, you don't need to have any specific. Just show up.
So, follow up, for someone who's a little more nervous, would you say something similar like door knocking would be enough for someone a little more nervous to feel like they have something similar to go back on?
Yeah, yeah. Door knocking, I think they're both a little different, but I think if you're nervous, find a buddy. Would be my best advice.
Hi, Emmy, thank you. So you and Josh showed us around the Connecticut State Capitol, and that day was amazing. It was eye-opening. It opened up a whole new world of advocacy for me that I didn't know existed. So thank you both so much. It was a fantastic day. We had 10 people show up, and 2 of which were dressed like in sweatpants and dirty, grungy like sweatshirts. And these people really knew their way around the Capitol building and were on a first name basis with so many of the legislators that it blew my mind. I don't have to show up in a suit to advocate at my state capitol and be effective. So, you know, to that point, like, it's okay. I don't think you have to be perfect, or even, but I think more importantly is like to be prepared with the information that you want to get in front of your legislators, right? So one of my questions will be, how do we adequately prepare for our first meeting with our state reps or our state senator, for one? So that's one question. The other one was, while I was at the Capitol, I saw a great pamphlet from the League of Women Voters that just spelled out everything that we did in this walkthrough was already in this darn brochure. So if you don't have partners to recommend to us to help us advocate at our state capitals outside of Connecticut, do you feel like the League of Women Voters is a good place to stop and ask? Because that brochure was amazing.
Yeah.
So those are my 2 questions.
So your first question, remind me of your first question.
My first question was information to have prepped and ready
Yes.
for our first meeting.
So, yes, information to have prepped and ready. I think you guys know what you want to talk about, right? And you've done research, and if you feel like you're maybe not that confident, do a little more research. I think that one of the best ways to prepare is to have something to leave behind, like one page, right? Like we literally call it a one-pager. It's really helpful, and there have been times when I'm talking to legislators where I say, oh, you know, and I have this fact sheet that I can leave with you, and they, oh, thank God, because everybody is trying to talk to them about all of the issues that are important to them. So it's also important to recognize that like your legislators are, first of all, they're people, right? And they're juggling this huge responsibility. They're managing risk, like I said, and they're not experts in everything. So it's really helpful to show up, you know, prepared enough to talk to your issue. It's okay if you don't know everything, right? You can say, you know, that's a really great question. Let me get back to you. And actually, that's a really sweet opportunity to follow up with them. But you know, having, I would say, in terms of like your actual preparation, having a one-pager ready to go, a fact sheet, not too wordy, but and keep your contact. Oh, do you have an example? Okay. Oh yeah. Look at this. This is somebody who did their homework. This is beautiful. I love the graphics and the illustrations. Yeah, this is what you need, right? And something to leave behind, and they keep it, they put it in a folder, they show it to their staffer, and then, you know, when ranked choice voting comes up, they say, oh, you know what, I think I talked to Nathan, and he gave me this, and you know what, if I want to know more, I can go to voterchoicema.org, or maybe have your contact information on it, so that it sort of bridges the gap, because they can't remember everything. Okay, and then your second question.
The second question was, League of Women Voters. They have a
Yes.
chapter in every northeastern state, I believe.
Yes, League of Women Voters is an excellent resource. They are the organization that does all of our capital tours. I don't know if that's true at every state legislature, but your state capital is your building. It is the people's building, right? You can show up during business hours, and generally they'll give you a free tour. I still have actually not taken an official tour of the Connecticut State Capitol. I got an unofficial tour when I first started working there for House Dems, but it's on my bucket list. But yeah, League of Women Voters is an excellent resource. If you're looking for just like, that would be a great place to start. If you're looking for your session calendar, you need to know the rules of the legislature, maybe find a map, definitely reach out. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Gab.
Hello. So when I was advocating for ranked choice voting this year, I got a few emails back, which was fun, but a lot of them were like the legislatures pointing at someone else and being like, oh, that person actually is the person you should talk to. And it's like, I also emailed them and they said I should talk to you. So
that happens a lot. And everybody's pointing at the feds. Like the governor's like, man, Trump, right? I'm like, yeah, okay, but also what are you doing? Anyway, continue.
So I get the sense that while I'm advocating, I'm gonna run up into a lot of people giving me excuses. How can I, what do I do next? When I get that excuse that feels like just a back pocket excuse, it's not real, what do I do after?
That's a really good question. Okay, let me think about this. I think, well, first of all, to go back to finding your window, right? I think knowing enough in advance to know, like, so I didn't have time to get into all the nitty-gritty of this, right? But like, if my bill is in the Public Health Committee, during the committee process, it's not helpful for me to email, unless they're my legislator. It's not that helpful for me to email somebody on Human Services if they don't also serve it on Public Health, right? So knowing who the person is to talk to is helpful. I would say always start with your legislators because you are their constituent. You are the one who votes or doesn't vote for them, and they really want you to like them, regardless of your party. We have, like I said, people who come from nonprofit CEOs or whatever. They'll come and advocate with us. I had 2 legislators bring their constituents onto the House floor just to like, yeah, make them feel special, right? So start with your own legislators, but then, right, knowing sort of who to target. And you might get brushed off, right? You're gonna get the finger pointing, The House loves to blame the Senate loves to blame the House, everybody loves to blame the governor loves to blame the legislature, all of them blame the president. You know, there's gonna be tons of finger pointing. I think, my advice would be just like, thank them for taking the time to read your email, offer them, you know, if this, you know, maybe right now it's in the committee process, but if this comes to a vote, I just wanted to introduce myself as somebody you can ask questions to. And, you know, thank them for their time, follow up with whoever they say, but, don't be dissuaded either, right? Like, be consistent, be persistent. Follow up. Maybe you emailed them a little early on. It's the committee process, and they're, I don't serve on that committee, but they all vote on everything if it gets called to a vote. So, you know, just wanted you to have this information. Feel free to reach out with questions. I hope that answers your question. It's frustrating and tricky to navigate. Any other questions? Things I didn't get into? If you think of anything, yeah.
3,000 hours per year?
No, not
That's
3,000
57
hours.
a week.
$3,000
Okay.
worth of paid time.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry, not 3,000 hours a year.
I might have misheard.
No, I might have missed those.
7 hours a week, are you sneaky?
Well, I had something else I wanted to talk about. It's okay. It'll come back to me. Or it won't, that's okay. But if anybody thinks of any questions, or, you know, you're getting ready to plan a lobby day, or you want somebody to look over your fact sheet, like, please reach out to me. My email's here, but Josh has my contact. I think it's probably in your agenda, maybe. Yeah, don't hesitate